The teacher.
Just stay calm. Everything will be fine.
Alex thought it himself bitterly for the fifth or sixth time today while hurrying down a picture frame laden hall in his home. Fishing his car keys out of his pocket, he went over the checklist in his head. The empty boxes for getting dinner and assembling the crib weren't going to check themselves, and his anxiety candle was already burned low. Most of the stress of the day, Wednesday, September 20th, 2006, had been caused by a customer service call he'd ended only a few moments ago. Turned out the new crib he'd spent the last few hours attempting to assemble was missing 3 tiny screws. Focal points of stability, apparently. After a long chat with a not-so-friendly man named Pete at the Ready Last Furniture Company in Baton Rouge, Alex thought,
To heck with this. I'll find replacements at the store.
and hung up. Reaching the living room, he found Melissa lying comfortably in her new napping spot. They seemed to be changing week to week. An open bottle of acetaminophen was left on the coffee table.
Must be another headache.
His wife had been having more and more as the pregnancy went along. Sneaking across the living room, avoiding the empty cardboard boxes and package stuffing littering their floor, he grabbed his favorite denim jacket and moved to their heavy, carved wooden front door, looking to exit silently when his favorite voice spoke up, catching him in the act. "You've got to be kidding. Where could you possibly have to go?" Melissa wasn't just awake, but was sitting up, scratching her head of thick, curly crimson hair, which was close to swallowing her hand. With a yawn, she patted down her pants pockets and looked around. "Where's my phone? What time is it? Did I pee myself? Why am I wet?" "It's a little after 6, Alex replied. "I'm just going out one more time. The crib is missing some parts. You didn't pee. I think that's sweat. I turned the air back on. It was off again for some reason." "The crib?" Melissa gave him the look she always did to let him know he was acting too cautious or tense for her taste. "Hon, please. The baby's not going to need that for a few weeks. Pretty sure we'll survive the night. Remember what the tapes said about slowing your roll? So slow it."
She.
It was still strange talking about their daughter without a proper name, but Alex and Melissa both agreed to wait until meeting her to give her one.
Names are a big deal in our book.
"I also assumed you wanted takeout for dinner," Alex said. "I was going to call in our order when I got in the car." Melissa agreed. "On second thought, you're right. You should go." "Any special requests?" "The usual, please. With egg rolls, please. Love you, please." She smiled wide, like a kid who thought they were gaming the system. Before she could get up off the couch, Alex hurried to her and leaned down to kiss his wife. The taste of her organic mint lip balm was left on his lips. "Love you back," he said. "Are we finishing the movie tonight? I have to return it tomorrow." "Maybe. The girls from my salsa class are coming over later, remember? Do we still have those little cookies? The ones with the grooves?" Melissa made a wavy motion with her hands as she asked.
Monthly tea party. Right. Forgot.
"I think there's a new box in the cupboard," Alex said. "If not, I can go to Fry's before going to the hardware store." "No, honey, chill. It's fine. You're the best, but we'll be fine. You know you can always hang out with us. The girls love you." Despite returning their affections, the thought of being around any group of people, let alone a swarm of Melissa's girlfriends, made Alex's anxiety soar to new heights. "Thanks, but if it's okay with you, I'll be out back. Try to get some work done." "Of course. Work that wood, love," Melissa replied. "Can't wait to see the doves when they're finished. Make sure you drive safe." Alex had not taken any time to work on his wood carvings since he'd injured his left hand the night he found out they were expecting a baby.
Still having trouble opening and closing it fully.
The pair of doves he was carving out of a huge chunk of Indian elm had already taken 2 years of his time away from other woodworking and craft projects, including his first attempt at a watercolor, a desert mountain scene. Yet for some reason he could not stop obsessing over the doves.
I don't even like doves. They're gross when you get down to it. Just need to finish it.
Before leaving the house, he called in their dinner order from the house landline. To sweeten the deal for his wife, he ordered twice as many egg rolls. The guy on the other line said the order would be ready in 20 minutes. Throwing on his denim jacket to cover his t-shirt, which was smeared with paint, Alex stepped out, pulling down his favorite blue baseball cap to shield his eyes from the Arizona sun. The cap was old and not likely to last forever, so he reserved wearing it for rare occasions such as this when he got to be handy. Heat waves rolled off the hoods of neighbors' cars, and the road turned to mush in the distance. Wiping away the sweat pouring from his dark eyebrows, which took constant maintenance to keep reasonably sized and separated, Alex locked his door, checking it 3 times before stepping away from the ranch-style home, the same his mother had grown up in before him. He and Melissa were close with most of their neighbors in the three-quarter circle, but today no one was out to wave hello to, except for an older man he didn't know well named Miles, who lived in the corner house at the end, currently watering his plants with his ass crack hanging out of his swim trunks. Prior to Miles, another family had lived in the house when Alex was a kid, a young couple with a little boy a few years younger than him, and a baby girl. A few attempts were made, mostly on Alex's end, to build a friendship between the boys, but nothing ever materialized. Though Alex had been a shy, timid child who rarely played with the neighborhood kids, the boy who lived in the house at the end of the street was even more fearful and closed off from the world. Shortly after Alex went out of state for college, the boy's family moved away. Never sure what happened to him, Alex seemed to remember his mother telling him the boy passed away a few years later.
What was that kid's name? For the life of me, I can't remember.
Getting into his car, he found he'd forgotten to crack the windows again.
Hate this heat.
Wincing, he forced the scorching seatbelt into its latch. The car puttered to life with a puff of smoke, and off he drove down the cul-de-sac nestled on the north end of town, near a barren stretch of desert facing looming mountains. As he drove along the east side of his backyard, enormous by suburban standards, with plenty of cacti, snakes, and prairie dog holes, Alex reminded himself to fill them in with dirt and lay down fresh grass before his daughter learned to walk.
It's on the list.
Arriving at the hardware store on the corner of Olive and Judson, a small place owned by Ma and Pa types, he drove past stacks of lumber and summer cookout gear sitting next to the entrance, likely overnight, based on an honor system with local thieves. Finding his ideal parking spot, far away from any other cars, Alex got out and hurried towards the entrance, but halted when a vagrant stepped out from behind a stack of plastic chairs. The old man smiled with the few teeth he had. "'Excuse me, didn't startle you, did I?" He then took a step back to show he wasn't a threat.
Not this guy again.
"Of course not," Alex said. "I'm sorry, I don't have any work for you. Just need some screws." "Working screws, huh? Bet there's a joke in there somewhere," the vagrant replied. "No, son, I was just curious if you knew the time." He stared at Alex with attentive eyes, strikingly gray, along with a comforting smile etched into his wrinkled, expressive face, with sun-damaged skin akin to leather. Atop his head rested a gray, moldy knitted cap with 2 brown stripes. Soft patches of speckled gray hair poked out from under it, dangling over and around his enormous ears, which were honestly hard not to stare at. "Sure, it's about 6:30, Alex replied. The vagrant rubbed his scruffy chin. Appreciate it." Stepping past Alex, he continued wandering the lot. Feeling the same swell of guilt he had the last few times he'd seen this guy, Alex turned. "Wait," he called, fishing in his pocket and putting some coins in the vagrant's hands. "Hope that's enough change," he said, breaking eye contact with the old man's piercing peepers and moving for the store entrance. "Whatever someone can spare is always enough," the old man said as the automatic doors closed behind Alex. The store had one cashier working, an overly polite 94-year-old named Mr. Milton, who did not know the meaning of haste.
Or proper hygiene.
Finding a box of Phillips head screws that would do the trick, Alex got in line at checkout, cringing as Mr. Milton licked his fingers for every bill he handed the woman he was helping. When Alex's turn came, he made a swift swipe of his credit card and got out with his tiny A4 screws, before Mr. Milton could even get a plastic bag off the rack. Planning to sidestep the beggar with the gray knitted cap on his way back to his car, Alex saw the man crossing the street, headed down the block, and felt another rush of guilt at how relieved he was. The drive to the restaurant was spent imagining what his daughter's crib might look like when done. There were plenty of improvements he wanted to make to its design. As shipped, it would not be stable enough to house his and Melissa's baby girl. Plus, Alex couldn't resist the temptation to try out some tricks he'd read about in his monthly woodworking magazines. The sun was low in the sky, the clouds shimmering like white gemstones, when he reached a busy intersection and stopped, drumming on his steering wheel as he waited. Spotting a man in tattered clothes coming down the lane of cars and holding a cardboard sign, Alex lowered his eyes and pretended to search his center console. Judging the hobo's speed, hoping it would remain constant, Alex turned back to find the hobo parked right outside his window, holding up the sign with a smile. It read, "Know any good jokes?" Alex forced a polite smile, shook his head, and turned away before doing a double take.
Those ears!
But the beggar was gone. A few seconds later, Alex spotted him, now 15 feet away, continuing down the lane of cars.
That's the same guy from the hardware store. But how? He's 2 miles back on foot.
The vagrant was now too far away to see any detailed features, but Alex was positive it was the same guy. Like a faucet turning on, dozens of moments from the past came back to him, seemingly out of thin air.
Hasn't he seemed to be in 2 places before? The mall a few days ago, and also the gym? The liquor store, and also the post office? How could he? No, that's ridiculous.
The cars behind him slammed on their horns as the green turn arrow turned yellow, making Alex fumble getting into gear. His car jumped across the line as the light turned red, the only one to make it through before traffic commenced, causing him to initiate internal self-whipping and anxiety-riddled apologies to the universe. Pulling onto Chandler Boulevard off of Francis Street, Alex parked in front of the restaurant, Bry's Thai, nearly hidden by the huge tree out front lifting and breaking the sidewalk. Before getting out, he spotted someone he thought might be the same bearded vagrant leaving a cash loan-out service, but turned out to be only a hipster.
Don't overthink this. There's an explanation why you keep seeing the same guy everywhere.
The entrance to the restaurant was vibrant, with a multitude of colors on display, though blue was the primary. The statues adorning the tables outside and inside the entrance held idols from many walks of Asian culture, mismatching copious belief structures and ideas of the origins of the soul. But the Filipino family who'd purchased the restaurant from a kind Thai couple who'd run the place for 20 years simply did not care. They just wanted to make everyone happy. A plastic strip of bells attached to the door chimed as Alex entered, having lost what was once a vigorous jingle over the years. The owner, Brian, looked up from the cash register with boredom in his eyes. Alex hoped that meant his food was ready. "Hi," Alex said, closing the door behind him, wondering if his welcome was overdone. Brian stayed quiet until he approached the counter.
This guy, I've been helping him keep the lights on for years. Can't even say hello. No, it's not him you're mad at. Stay calm. Everything will be fine. Stay calm. Everything will be fine.
The mantra slowed his pulse. "I had an order for pickup," Alex said. "Name?" Brian asked. "It's the pad thai, yellow curry, and egg rolls." "Name?" "Barker." "Not ready." Brian finished with a smack of his lips. "You can't just say that? You know who I am. I've stood in this spot 10,000 times. I mean..." Alex felt proud of himself for what he viewed as a violent public outburst, truly defending himself. But Brian was unaffected. Alex sighed and lowered his head. "How much longer?" 5 minutes. Brian wrote scribbles on his pad and stepped aside, revealing a little girl sitting on a chair and peering over the countertop. She was wearing a bright pink jacket with teal and orange stripes across the chest, and stared up at Alex with wide, nervous eyes, probably because he'd yelled in public. He waved and played up a hearty smile, hoping it was enough to heal any mental scars before they set in. She went back to playing with her doll.
Thank God, she's desensitized.
Turning to use one of the waiting chairs, Alex found a small family occupying them, a young mother and her 2 kids waiting on to-go orders. The stroller beside her was empty. A dozen or so shopping bags hung from its handles, and its intended rider, a 3-year-old sucking on a pacifier standing next to it, turned a bashful cheek and hid when Alex caught his gaze. His older sister sitting next to their mother must have been 7, and was engrossed in a European history book that looked intense for her age, unaware of the goings-on around her. She reminded Alex of one of his students, Emily Morgan, a shy girl who spent most of her time buried in books as a way to deal with a ghastly home life. She had a bright future, as long as she worked hard. Sadly, Alex couldn't say the same about many of the 4th graders who passed through his doors, though the few he could made it all worth it. With the seats taken, He was free to visit the fish tank in the dining room, his favorite thing about Brian's restaurant. Moving through the archway into the small space with 6 tables, cracked tile flooring, and a flat screen TV in the corner showing conservative evening news, Alex found the 5-foot saltwater fish tank on his right. His favorite fish, the single black one, triangle shaped, with a yellow stripe down its belly and a red oval on its underbelly, was bobbing on the tank floor. "Hey, Bob, how's it hanging? Enjoying that fish life? Looks easy." Bob opened and closed his mouth a few times. "Sounds good. Keep it up." A quick glance was all Alex needed, as he wanted to wash his hands before handling his pregnant wife's food. Hurrying down the side hallway that led to a service closet and the restaurant's only bathroom, he stepped in, closed the door with his foot, and used his shirt to close the handle lock. Averting his eyes from the wet floor sticking to his shoes, he lifted the toilet seat with his foot. Settling in, with no place else to be, he let out a sigh. Once the food was ready, it would be another story, but for the time being, he could relax and enjoy his piss. Closing his eyes, he waited for a wave of serenity, remembering the relaxation tapes Melissa had gotten him.
Just stay calm. Everything will be fine.
What came was more a spritz of serenity. He double-checked his to-do list in his head. The screws were safe in his pocket, which was priority number 1, coming after the real priority 1, Melissa's egg rolls. Alex fell into warm thoughts of her, his source of strength, the only person on the planet who could talk him down from a ledge, knowing soon even she would be number 2 in his life. Any day now, he would be holding his new source of strength and calm in his arms.
And she'll finally have a name.
Finishing his pee, he flicked his dick twice, zipped his pants, and pressed the flush handle with his shoe. The chimes on the restaurant's front door rang, but Alex paid them no attention. Washing his hands well, he looked at himself in the mirror. His baseball cap was tilted. He fixed it.
So you're gonna be a father, huh?
He straightened his posture.
Dads stand tall.
His grandfather, Grandpa Parai, used to tell him something similar. Don't let the people see a slouch. Let them see a mountain. Alex took one last look at himself in the mirror, wondering if his grandfather would have been proud of him if he were alive, when a muffled yell escaped the lobby, possibly Brian.
Finally, food's ready.
Stepping out of the bathroom, Alex proceeded down the service hallway. Upon entering the lobby, lost in daydreams of fatherhood, he hardly noticed the others in the Thai restaurant lobby were silent. The TV in the dining room was broadcasting to no one. He first spotted the mother of 2, clenching her jaw, with an intense gaze fixed on the counter, clutching her bookworm daughter with both arms. Following their gazes, he found a figure standing at the lobby counter wearing a black hooded sweatshirt. Their back was turned, and the hood was up, preventing Alex from seeing a face.
That's odd.
He then spotted Brian, his once bored eyes now sober and direct, analyzing the newcomer with urgency. His left arm was keeping his daughter, peeking out from under his arm, from wandering forward. The first thought that passed through Alex's mind was that the figure in the hood had been injured or witnessed a car accident and needed to call the police. The details must have been shocking, and Alex must have missed hearing them. He wanted to know, to help. "What's going on?" he asked, at once wishing he could take the words back or make time stand still. The figure spun as Alex uttered his first syllable, revealing a wad of cash from Brian's open register in one hand and a 9mm handgun aimed at Alex's chest in the other. The gun snatched his gaze, and he could not break it. The only important thing in Alex's life was which direction that small weapon was facing. His walks as a kid with his grandfather in the hills outside Prescott came rushing back. "Don't point a gun at anything you don't want to kill, Allie," Grandpa Parai would grumble. "Back the fuck up!" the thief shouted. His voice was young, far too young. In his blurred peripheral vision, Alex could see he wore a red and black baseball cap and had a smattering of facial hair. He was waving the gun wildly, as though trying to break Alex's gaze on it. The barrel pointed at him again, and again, and again. The following 6 seconds lasted for what seemed like minutes. With the gunman's attention on Alex, Brian backed his daughter away, reaching for a telephone with his right hand, hopefully to call the police. Meanwhile, Alex strained to find the right thing to say to the robber. His first words had been atrocious. His next would have to be better, but he was coming up short. The nanoseconds were creeping by. The idea of lunging at the young man crossed his mind, but he knew a direct assault wouldn't work.
Too far apart.
In addition, there was no knowing if this guy was alone. Then, a painfully annoying thought found its way into his head.
What if the gun isn't loaded?
Calm down. Alex hated how the words fell out of his mouth. That's your money, right? You got it. It's all good. Shut up, the young man interrupted, baring his teeth.
Not a smile. Maybe grinding them.
Alex still refused to take his eyes off the gun. Everything is going to be fine. Please, put down the gun, he said. Alex and the gunman jolted when the 3-year-old behind him started crying. Luckily, the robber didn't start shooting, increasing Alex's suspicions the gun was empty. He could hear the mother trying like mad to keep her son from crying, wishing he could turn to give the kid a reassuring smile. The gunman then shouted something Alex couldn't make out and turned the weapon on the mother of 2 and her kids, making the teacher realize he preferred the gun pointed at himself. Shut the fuck up! Everybody acting like they're better than me, like I don't know anything, telling me to do shit. I'm sick of it. All of it. Always whispering things, fucking things in my ear, talking about me, never to me. No one listens back. Nobody, the gunman cried. We hear you, Alex replied, his hands up, being careful not to make sudden movements. The 3-year-old continued to wail so loudly his voice was cracking. Get the kid to shut up! Fucking people won't let me think, the gunman shouted. Easy with that, Brian called from behind the counter. The gunman paced, grunting, breathing heavy, clenching his fists, and closed his eyes. In response, Alex's body turned on its evolutionary programming and, whether he liked it or not, moved rapidly to intervene. He was 4 steps away. If he could just get between the family and the gun, he could keep talking to the gunman and act as a barrier. Mid-run, in the corner of his vision, Alex spotted Brian with a heavy kitchen knife in hand, leaping over the counter to tackle the gunman. His keys, dangling from his belt loop, smashed the countertop. The sound seemed 1,000 times louder than the bells above the door. The gunman screamed and spun, closing his eyes and firing 3 times. Alex leapt towards the family. The deafening bangs were joined by breaking glass and rushing water.
He hit the fish tank.
Wood exploded somewhere.
Probably in the drywall.
But there was no sound to indicate where the 3rd bullet landed. Then the 6 seconds were up. Water from the fish tank spilled over his shoes as Alex fell to the floor, surprised he'd lost his footing so easily. He then spotted Brian and the gunman wrestling and the gun falling to the floor, staying silent on impact. The mother of 2 hurried to pick it up and get it the hell away as the gunman broke free of Brian and backed away towards the entrance. With the pistol out of the picture, Alex finally looked at the gunman's face, finding a frightened set of blue eyes above a shaking jaw. He couldn't have been more than 17. His lip and eyebrow busted open and bleeding from a previous fight, which must have taken place before he ever set foot in the restaurant. The gunman took quick glances at the scared faces in the restaurant, but when his gaze landed on Alex, he paused, his jaw quaking. Brian rose from the ground, winded, brandishing the knife. Get out! His daughter leapt to his side and latched onto him. The gunman's lips trembled. He was right. How? Now! Brian bellowed. The gunman broke his gaze with Alex and ran as fast as he could, smashing into the doorframe on his way out, most likely leaving a long bruise. Then he was gone. The $214 he'd attempted to steal sat scattered in the middle of the lobby floor. But Alex wasn't ready for it to be over. He was determined to chase the kid. He wanted to break a bottle and stab him in the back of the leg, maybe cutting a tendon, just to keep him in place until the police arrived. The adrenaline rushing through him was all-encompassing. For the first time in his life, Alex wanted revenge. He applied his usual thought to moving his arms and legs, yet remained on the ground, as a fog rolled into his mind. A chill crept up his spine as something wet crawled up his pelvis. It wasn't the fish tank water, and he was 80% sure he hadn't pissed his pants. The pieces then came together quickly.
The 3rd bullet.
Alex allowed himself to go there in his mind, releasing his fight with reality.
I've been shot.
From there, time only seemed to move faster. People were shouting. The whole of the room was becoming a muddy orchestra of noise. Alex suddenly felt as heavy as a 1-ton bowling ball sinking into the floor. The chemicals running through his veins were pumping him with rage and a desire to live and conquer, yet he could not move. Looking down, he saw red soaking his shirt from his lower right abdomen. Wanting to know exactly where he'd been shot, he stuck his right hand, shaking uncontrollably, down his pants. Blood was pouring out by the pint. It didn't take long for his soaked fingers, running along his hip, to find the hole. When Alex's ring finger slipped in, the nerve endings lit up with sharp, icy pain, making him gasp. He began to picture the ambulance arriving to save him. The paramedics would be the sweetest thing he'd ever seen, as they lifted his head, maybe stroked his hair, meaning he was safe. But when he opened his eyes, it was the mother of two above him, propping his head up with her jacket. Doctor or not, angel or not, she made him feel better. He wished he knew her name. Are you okay? The 7-year-old was standing above him, holding her little brother's hand, waiting while their mother tended to Alex. He wanted to joke with them, like he did with his students, but a new feeling was settling in, further silencing him. Like hot metal had been poured into his wound and was creeping its way along the bullet's path. He could sense where it had stopped, a burning center under his left rib cage, like a red-hot coal. The agony pulsed within him like a subwoofer, where the bullet had most likely shattered his hip and lower spine. He could only imagine the damage it did to his internal organs. The pain rolled over Alex until he couldn't hold back and released a primitive, animalistic cry as his consciousness took its first dive away from his body and yo-yoed back. A vibrating, visceral, cold rush washed over him like ice water. It felt like truth. This was it. He was going to die. The people in the restaurant were locking the doors and closing the windows and blinds. No one else was likely to lose their life tonight. Alex let a smile creep up his cheek at the thought. He needed it. The sleep coming upon him was fantastically inviting, offering a world free from pain, where he wasn't lying in a pool of his own blood. Against those promised comforts, he fought to keep his mind going, to hang on for as long as he could, and began a new checklist in his mind, the things he needed to do before checking out. Asking himself what higher power he believed in, he realized none particularly came to mind. Alex's family had abandoned their church when he was 18, and he'd hardly thought of God or heaven or hell since. Of all the things he was afraid of, eternal damnation had never been one of them. But in this moment, the thought terrified him. He was 80 to 90% sure he'd been a decent person, but the basic belief structures of the major religions, and the multiple sects they branched into, seemed hugely contradictory, so there could be no way to know what the fate of his soul would be. Therefore, he decided to let it go.
Are those sirens?
Deep down, he knew it wasn't true. His body was sagging, and his lungs were slowing down, leaving him only enough energy for a few more breaths. He needed to move his thoughts to the one place he was too afraid to go, the one place that actually mattered: Melissa and their baby. The thought of her raising their daughter on her own did not scare him. She would find a way. It's what she did. But the thought of not being there himself was what broke Alex. He wanted to see the color of his daughter's eyes and find out what her personality would be like, if she would inherit some of his more neurotic traits. He hoped she would find a good partner someday and go on to do important things and be happy.
Happy. That's most important.
He then thought of Melissa's hair and smile and saw her laugh in his mind and heard her singing in the shower. He smelled her burned grilled cheese sandwiches and saw the girl he met on the first day of 9th grade science class, remembering their first kiss at age 21 at a friend's party when they were visiting home after college. The only real regret Alex ever had was not doing it sooner.
That's fine,
he thought.
That's a good one.
As Alex looked back on his life, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He'd done his best to be true and loved the same woman every single day. That was all any higher power could ask, right? If the sirens were approaching, he wouldn't have known. Alex couldn't sense the world anymore, and the sleep was calling, but he wanted one more look around. Finding his last bit of energy, he forced his eyes open. The walls were the purest blue he had ever seen. The reds were extraordinary. Each poster detail was a wonder. A gleam of light from outside fell on his eye, and Alex found one of the window blinds left open. Standing beyond the glass was the vagrant wearing a gray knitted cap with two brown stripes, looking down on him with a slight smile on his wrinkled face. The softness of his brilliant gray eyes transferred into the mind of the teacher, stilling him.
Who are you?
Alex's lungs gave up. His eyes closed. The sleep was here. Everything was fading. Lastly, he heard a dampened cry in his mind from a hushed voice he didn't recognize. Alex?